The dense forest was quiet, save for the sound of wind rustling through the trees. Ethan loved hiking. There was something peaceful about being away from the busy world. Just him, nature, and the sound of his boots crunching the leaves beneath him. He had come to this remote part of the forest to escape the noise of his everyday life. The city, his job, his responsibilities. It all felt like too much sometimes. In the forest, he could breathe. As he trekked through the woods, he noticed something strange in the distance, a bright flash of light in the sky. It wasn't the normal sun reflecting off the trees, and it certainly wasn't the glow of a plane. This was something different. His curiosity piqued. Ethan quickened his pace, wondering if he had just witnessed a meteor or something equally unusual. But the flash wasn't just a streak in the sky. It was getting closer, much closer. Suddenly, with a loud crash that made the ground shake beneath his feet, a massive object plummeted from the sky, smashing through the treetops before hitting the ground with an ear-splitting bang. Ethan froze for a moment, his heart racing. He could barely believe what he had just seen. It wasn't a meteor, and it wasn't a plane. It looked like some kind of spaceship. He hesitated, looking around, wondering if anyone else had witnessed this strange event. The forest seemed empty, just him, and whatever had just fallen from the sky. Without thinking twice, Ethan ran toward the crash site. His adrenaline kicked in, his instincts taking over. He had no idea what he was about to find, but he couldn't just leave it alone. As he neared the wreckage, the smell of burnt metal and smoke filled the air. The trees had been torn apart, and pieces of debris were scattered all over the place. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie. At the center of the wreckage, he spotted a figure. At first, he thought it was a human, but then he noticed the odd proportions. The figure wasn't entirely human, at least, not in the way he had expected. It was a woman, but she looked different. Her skin had a faint bluish glow, and her features were delicate yet sharp. Her long hair shimmered with an iridescent sheen, as though it held colors that couldn't quite be described with words. She was lying on the ground, unconscious. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Is she okay? He muttered to himself, rushing forward. He knelt beside her, checking for any signs of life. Her chest was rising and falling, but she was hurt, badly. Cuts and bruises covered her arms and face, and her clothing was torn. He could tell she was in pain, but she was alive. That was all that mattered. His mind raced as he scanned the wreckage around him. The spacecraft had clearly crashed violently, and there was no sign of help coming. He had no idea where she was from, but the most immediate thing he needed to do was get her to safety. He couldn't leave her here alone to die. His hand shook as he carefully reached out to touch her arm. "Hey, can you hear me?" he asked softly, his voice filled with concern. She groaned, her eyes fluttering open. They were an unusual color, almost glowing silver, unlike anything he had ever seen before. For a moment, their gazes locked. She looked confused, disoriented, and scared, but there was something about her eyes that felt almost otherworldly. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus, but it was clear she wasn't fully conscious. Ethan didn't know what to say or do, but he knew he had to act fast. The wreckage was too exposed, and if anyone else saw them, there could be trouble. "Stay with me, okay?" he whispered, trying to comfort her, though he wasn't sure she understood. Her lips parted, but all she managed was a faint, barely audible sound, a mix between a gasp and a whimper. She wasn't speaking English, or any language Ethan could understand. His mind raced for ideas. "Come on," he said, trying to lift her. "We need to move." With great care, he managed to lift her, cradling her in his arms. She didn't protest, though she was still disoriented and weak. Ethan glanced around the wreckage again. There was no telling how much time they had before someone else came to investigate the crash. His instincts told him to get her out of sight, to find shelter before it was too late. Without thinking, Ethan turned and headed in the direction of the nearest cabin. It wasn't far. He knew the area well. He had hiked these woods many times before. The cabin had been abandoned for years, a perfect hideout. As he made his way through the forest, he felt a strange mix of fear and awe. Who was this woman? What had happened to her? And where had she come from? The forest seemed quieter now, as though it was holding its breath, and the weight of the situation settled on Ethan's shoulders. His mind was racing. An alien. This woman was an alien. The thought sent a shiver down his spine, but more pressing than her origins was her safety. He had to protect her. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan finally reached the cabin, barely winded but still rattled by the encounter. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was dark and dusty, but it would serve its purpose for now. Gently, he laid the strange woman on the floor and tried to catch his breath. He looked at her, worried that she might still be in danger. She was still unconscious, but her breathing had steadied. Ethan wasn't sure what to do next. Should he call for help? Would the government get involved if they found out? Would anyone believe him if he said he found an alien in the forest? His mind was a whirl of questions, but there was one thing he was sure of. He couldn't let anyone take her. Not yet. Ethan sat down beside her, his mind spinning as he tried to figure out what had just happened. This wasn't something he could explain to anyone. No one would believe him. It was like something out of a dream. And yet here she was, alive, vulnerable, and dependent on him. As the night drew on, he stayed by her side, watching over her as she slept fitfully. He didn't know what the future held, or how he could possibly help her, but there was one thing he was certain of. He wasn't going to leave her. He was the only one who could help her now. The days that followed the crash were strange, and unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. He had always been a quiet, solitary man, content with his simple life of hiking and living away from the noise of the city. But now he found himself in a situation that was anything but simple. Zira, the alien woman he had saved from the wreckage, was staying in his cabin. She was still unconscious, her body recovering from the impact of the crash, and Ethan had no idea how to help her. He had no idea where she was from, why she was here, or even what her name was. But as the days passed, a quiet, unspoken understanding grew between them. At first, Zira didn't speak much. Her eyes would flutter open occasionally, but she seemed confused and scared. She often winced in pain as if the world around her was too overwhelming. Her strange, glowing skin and silvery eyes were unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, and every time she looked at him, he could sense a mix of fear and curiosity in her gaze. It made him nervous, unsure of what she might be thinking. Ethan did what he could to help her. He used the basic first aid skills he had learned over the years, cleaning the cuts on her arms and face, making sure she was comfortable. He brought her food and water, though she didn't seem to eat much. Zira's body wasn't like a human's. She would sip small amounts of water, and sometimes her body would glow faintly, like she was absorbing energy from it in a way Ethan couldn't understand. But he didn't ask questions. At least, not yet. Zira's spaceship, or what was left of it, was still a mystery. There was no way to fix it, and with no communication device, they couldn't reach her people. Ethan had no idea if she was even from this part of the galaxy. He had no answers, only the quiet presence of this strange woman, and the quiet growing bond between them. Days passed, and eventually Zira's strength began to return. She could sit up, and her eyes had more clarity in them. Ethan tried to engage with her, but she mostly kept to herself. They didn't share words yet. Ethan didn't even know if she could understand English. It was frustrating, but somehow he felt that patience was the key. So he continued to sit by her side, offering food, helping her when she needed it, and waiting for her to open up. One morning, about a week after the crash, Ethan was sitting by the fire, brewing some tea when he heard Zira stir. She was sitting up, rubbing her eyes, looking around the cabin as if trying to figure out where she was. She didn't seem afraid, but there was still a lot of confusion in her expression. Ethan stood up, his heart racing. unsure of what to say. "Hey," he said, trying to sound calm. "How are you feeling?" Zira's eyes flicked toward him, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world stopped. She stared at him, her gaze intense and unblinking, as if she were reading him. Ethan swallowed hard, not sure how to interpret it. Finally, Zira spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, though her accent was strange, like nothing Ethan had ever heard before. "Who are you?" Her words were slow, like she was carefully choosing each one. "Where am I?" Ethan's heart skipped a beat. She was speaking. She could understand him. It felt like a small victory, but it was a big step in the right direction. "I'm Ethan," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You crashed here. I found you in the forest. You were hurt." Zira's eyes narrowed slightly as she processed this. "I crashed," she repeated softly, as if the idea was foreign to her. "My ship is gone." Ethan nodded. "It's wrecked. I don't know how to fix it, but I can help you. I'll protect you." Zira blinked, and for a moment, there was silence between them. She looked down at her hands, then back up at Ethan, studying him with those otherworldly silver eyes. It was hard to tell what she was thinking, but Ethan could sense that something had changed. She was no longer just the wounded stranger he had found in the woods. She was starting to become real to him. "Why do you help me?" Zira asked quietly, her voice still unsure. "I am not like you. I am not human." Ethan was taken aback by the question. Why? He hadn't really thought about it. He had just done it. But now that she asked, he had to think about it more deeply. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, sitting down across from her. "I guess I couldn't just leave you out there. It didn't feel right. You were hurt. I could help. So I did." Zira's gaze softened, and for a moment, there was a faint, almost imperceptible glimmer in her eyes, like she was starting to understand. "You are kind." Ethan blushed, feeling the warmth in his chest. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." Zira shook her head slowly. "Not everyone would." Ethan looked at her, unsure of what to say. He had never been great with words, especially not in situations like this. But as the days passed, he realized he didn't need to say much. Actions spoke louder. Zira needed him, and he needed to protect her. She had no one else. Over the next few days, they began to communicate more easily. Zira's English improved, and she started to ask more questions about Earth, about Ethan's life, about why he lived alone in the woods. She seemed fascinated by everything. The way humans lived, the way they interacted with the world around them, and the way they cared for one another. As for Ethan, he found himself growing more attached to her. He had never been one to open up to people, but Zira was different. She wasn't just any person. She wasn't even human. Yet in her eyes, he saw something that made him feel connected. She was alone, just like he was. They were both strangers in an unfamiliar world. One afternoon, Ethan went out to gather firewood, leaving Zira in the cabin. When he returned, he found her sitting on the porch, staring out into the trees. Her eyes seemed distant, like she was thinking about something far away, something beyond the woods. Ethan sat beside her, not saying anything at first. He didn't want to disturb her, but after a moment, he spoke gently. "Are you okay?" Zira glanced at him, her gaze softening. "I think of my home, my people. I wonder if they are looking for me." Ethan's heart ached at the thought. "Maybe. I'm sure someone is. But for now, you're safe here." Zira nodded slowly. "I do not know how long I can stay. My people, they will come. But I will be careful. I do not want to bring danger to you." Ethan's chest tightened. The idea that Zira might leave soon filled him with an unexpected sadness. He hadn't realized it until now, but he didn't want her to go. He didn't want to be alone again. "You don't have to leave," Ethan said softly, his voice almost a whisper. You don't have to go anywhere if you don't want to. Zira turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable for a moment. But you are human. I am not. My presence here may cause harm. It is not safe. Ethan reached out and gently took her hand. I don't care if you're not human. You're my friend, and I'll protect you. Zira didn't say anything at first. She simply stared at their joined hands, and Ethan felt the weight of the moment. He didn't know what the future held or what would happen when her people came looking for her, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let anything happen to her. Slowly, Zira looked up at him, her silver eyes filled with something that looked like trust. Thank you, Ethan, she said quietly. You have shown me kindness. I will not forget it. And for the first time, Ethan saw a faint smile form on her lips. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it made his heart skip a beat. Something was beginning to form between them. Something that neither of them had expected, but both of them needed. The days spent in the cabin were peaceful, but Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Zira was healing, slowly but surely. Her body was still adjusting to Earth's atmosphere, but every day she seemed a little stronger, a little more in control of her alien abilities. Despite her quiet strength, Ethan could sense her growing unease. It wasn't just the pain from the crash or the fear of her people discovering her whereabouts. It was the nagging feeling that she wasn't safe, that they weren't safe. Ethan tried to push the thought aside, but it lingered in his mind, like a shadow that refused to go away. He had taken every precaution to keep Zira hidden. He knew the woods well, and had made sure no one could track them to the cabin. Still, the fear gnawed at him. What if someone found her? What if the government, or worse, people with darker intentions, came looking for her? He couldn't protect her forever. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, Ethan returned from a trip to the nearby town. He had needed supplies, things he couldn't get in the woods. The cabin had enough food to last for a while, but there were certain things that were running low. When he arrived back, he noticed something strange. Zira wasn't sitting on the porch like usual. In fact, there was no sign of her at all. Zira, Ethan called out, his voice rising with concern. He hurried inside the cabin, searching the rooms, but she wasn't there. A chill ran down his spine. Where could she have gone? Panicking, Ethan ran outside, calling her name. He searched the immediate area, then the nearby woods, his heart pounding in his chest. It was getting dark, and the thought of Zira out there alone filled him with dread. But just as he was about to lose hope, he spotted her. She was standing at the edge of the forest, staring into the distance. Her silhouette was framed by the fading light of the sunset, her long hair rippling gently in the wind. Ethan's heart calmed a little, but only a little. Zira, he called again, walking toward her. She didn't turn at first. She just stood there, as though she were deep in thought. Finally, she turned to him, her expression unreadable. I needed to think, she said softly, her voice quieter than usual. I feel trapped. I cannot stay here forever. Ethan stopped in his tracks, a knot forming in his stomach. He had known this was coming. He had known she would want to leave, but hearing her say it made it all the more real. I don't want you to leave, Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. You're safe here. I can protect you. We don't have to run. Zira's eyes softened, but there was a sadness in them that Ethan couldn't ignore. You cannot protect me forever, Ethan. My people will come. They will find me, no matter how long I stay hidden. Ethan wanted to argue, but the truth was undeniable. Zira's ship had crashed weeks ago, and the wreckage was still out there. It wouldn't be long before someone came looking for it, and when they did, they'd find her. He couldn't keep her hidden forever, not like this. I don't care if they find you, Ethan said, stepping closer to her. I won't let anything happen to you. I'll help you find a way out. We'll figure something out. Zira shook her head, a hint of frustration in her expression. It's not just about hiding, Ethan. My people will not stop searching for me. They will destroy everything in their path to bring me back. And I do not want to put you in danger." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to think about Zira leaving. But deep down, he knew she was right. Staying here was becoming dangerous for both of them. The government, other agencies, there was no telling what they might do if they found Zira. "We'll leave," Ethan said suddenly, the words tumbling out of his mouth. "We can't stay here, but we can't just run either. Let's go somewhere else, somewhere they can't find us." "Zira," Ethan said gently, his voice breaking the stillness. "I need to know something." Zira didn't respond right away. She just continued to stare at the fire. It was as if she could feel the weight of his question, even before he asked it. Finally, she looked up at him, her silvery eyes reflecting the light of the fire. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked quietly, her voice calm but guarded. Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I've been wondering. You've never really told me much about where you're from, about your people, or why you're here. I don't need to know everything, but I need to understand more. You've trusted me with so much already, but I feel like there's something you're not telling me." Zira's eyes flickered briefly, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might pull away from the question. But instead, she took a slow, steady breath. She looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing invisible patterns in the dirt. Ethan waited patiently, sensing the weight of her thoughts. "I didn't want to tell you," Zira began softly, "because I didn't want to burden you with the truth. My mission, my people, it's complicated. I didn't come here by accident." Ethan felt his heart tighten in his chest. "You didn't?" "No," Zira replied, shaking her head. "I came here on purpose. I was sent here, to Earth, to gather information. My people, they need something from your planet." Ethan felt a cold chill wash over him. "What do they need? What is it?" Zira hesitated, and for a moment, she seemed almost reluctant to answer. But then she looked up at Ethan, her gaze full of sincerity. "My people are not like humans. We are advanced, yes, but our way of life is fragile. We are in danger of extinction. We've been searching for a new home, a new world for years. Earth is our last hope." Ethan was stunned. "Extinction," he repeated, trying to process what she had just said. "But I don't understand. Why Earth? What does your people want from us?" Zira's eyes softened, and she looked at him with a mixture of sadness and determination. "We need your resources, your energy. Your planet has what we need to survive. I was sent here to make contact with your governments, to negotiate a deal. We would help you, in exchange for what we need." Ethan was silent, his mind racing. This was so much bigger than anything he had imagined. He had thought Zira was simply a lost traveler, stranded here by accident. But now he understood that her arrival on Earth had been planned. She wasn't just a survivor of a crash. She was part of a mission. "Wait," Ethan said, trying to wrap his mind around the situation. "You were sent here to negotiate? To make a deal?" Zira nodded slowly. "Yes, but things went wrong. My ship was damaged before I could make contact. And now, I don't know how to fix it. Without my people, without the resources we need, we will not survive. I thought I could find a way on my own. But now." She trailed off, her voice faltering as her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. Ethan could see the pain in her expression, the weight of what she was carrying. She wasn't just a stranger on the run. She was someone desperate, fighting for survival, not only for herself, but for her entire species. "I didn't want to involve you, Ethan," Zira continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to put you in danger. But I can't do this alone. I need your help." Ethan's mind was swirling. Everything had changed. Zira wasn't just a woman from another world. She was someone with a mission, with a purpose. And it was a purpose that involved him now. "You've helped me," Zira said, looking at him with a quiet intensity. "You've kept me safe. You've protected me. But I can't stay hidden forever. My people will come for me. And when they do, they will bring the full force of their technology with them. They won't stop until they find me. Ethan felt a rush of conflicting emotions. He had thought that by helping Zira, he was just saving a person in need. But now, he understood that he had become part of something much larger. He had to make a choice. Did he continue helping her, knowing the risks? Or did he turn his back on her and walk away, leaving her to face her people alone? He didn't even have to think about it. "I'm not going to leave you," Ethan said firmly, his voice strong. "I don't care who they are or what they want. I won't let you face this alone." Zira looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper, something that felt like hope. "You don't understand, Ethan. You have no idea what you're agreeing to. Helping me could cost you everything." "I don't care," Ethan said, his heart resolute. "You've helped me in ways you don't even know. I'm not going to turn my back on you now." For a long moment, Zira said nothing. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Thank you. I know I've asked a lot of you. But I need you, Ethan. You're the only one who can help me now." The weight of her words hung in the air, and Ethan could feel the gravity of the situation settle in. He had just made a decision that could change everything. They were no longer just two people hiding from the world. They were part of something much larger, and the risks were greater than ever. "I'll help you," Ethan said quietly, "but I need to know more. What happens if they find us? What do we do?" Zira looked down at the fire, her face serious. "If my people find me, they won't let me go. They will take me back, and they will take whatever they need from your planet. They won't care about the consequences. They will do whatever it takes to survive." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had no idea what kind of power Zira's people had, but the fear in her voice told him it was something far beyond human understanding. He knew this wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about saving the planet, about stopping something far worse than just a stranded alien. "Then we'll fight," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We'll find a way to stop them." Zira looked at him, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in her eyes. "You would do that? You would fight for me, for my people?" "I'd fight for the world," Ethan replied, "because it's the right thing to do." Zira smiled softly, the first real smile Ethan had seen from her in days. "You are brave, Ethan. You are more than just a human. You are something special." Ethan didn't feel special. He felt scared, confused, and uncertain about what the future would bring. But one thing was clear: he wasn't going to turn back. The journey they had started was only just beginning, and whatever came next, they would face it together. The days that followed the revelation felt like a storm was gathering on the horizon. Zira's words echoed in Ethan's mind constantly. "If my people find me, they won't let me go. They'll do anything to survive." Ethan knew that the threat wasn't just about Zira. It was about something far bigger, something more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. Her people weren't here to simply make contact or ask for help. They had come to take what they needed by force if necessary, and if Zira's warnings were true, there was no escaping their wrath. Despite the fear that gnawed at the edges of his mind, Ethan found himself standing by Zira's side. He couldn't just walk away. He couldn't leave her alone to face this threat. But what could they possibly do? How could they stand up to an alien race with technology far beyond anything humanity had ever seen? They were just two people in the middle of nowhere. What chance did they have? But over the past few weeks, as they traveled farther from the cabin and deeper into the forest, a sense of purpose had begun to settle in. Ethan was no longer just protecting Zira because she was a stranger. She had become more than that to him. She had become his ally, his friend, and in many ways, he realized she had become someone he deeply cared for. The thought of losing her was unbearable. They had to do something. They had to take a stand. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the sky began to darken, Ethan and Zira found themselves in a small clearing by a quiet stream. They had made camp for the night, the crackling of a fire keeping the chill at bay. Ethan had spent the day building traps and making sure their campsite was hidden from any prying eyes. Zira sat by the fire, her gaze distant as she stared into the flames. Ethan could tell she was thinking deeply, her mind clearly racing with thoughts of the future. "Zira," Ethan said softly, sitting down next to her. He had been avoiding this conversation for days, but it couldn't wait any longer. "We can't keep running. Eventually, someone will find us, and if we don't make a stand now, we might not get another chance." Zira turned to look at him, her silver eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. "What do you mean, make a stand?" Ethan's heart was pounding in his chest, but he knew he had to say it out loud. He had been thinking about this for days, and the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. There was no point in waiting for the inevitable. If they were going to survive, they had to take action. "We fight back," Ethan said, his voice firm. "We find a way to stop your people from coming here and taking what they need. We stop them before they can hurt anyone else." Zira was silent for a long moment. She looked down at the fire, her fingers absently tracing the edge of a nearby stone. Ethan could feel her hesitation, the fear in her eyes as she considered his words. "You don't understand, Ethan," she said finally, her voice tinged with sorrow. "You think you can fight my people, but you can't. They're too powerful. They won't hesitate to destroy everything in their path if it means they get what they want. We won't stand a chance." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine, but he didn't back down. "I'm not afraid of them, Zira. You're not alone anymore. I'll fight with you, no matter what it takes." Zira's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "I know you would, Ethan, and I appreciate it more than you know. But this isn't just about fighting. It's about survival. If we try to stand up to them, we'll only make things worse. Your people won't be able to stop them either." Ethan didn't want to hear that. The idea of surrendering, of giving up without even trying, didn't sit right with him. "You said yourself that we can't hide forever. You said they would come for you no matter where you go. So what are we supposed to do? Just run for the rest of our lives?" Zira's gaze darkened, her face becoming serious. "There is one way, Ethan," she said, her voice low and almost a whisper. "A way to stop them before they can get to Earth." Ethan leaned in, his heart racing. "What is it?" Zira hesitated, clearly weighing her words carefully. "There is a device on my ship. It's a communication device, a beacon. It can be used to send a signal, a message, to my people. If I activate it, they will know exactly where I am, and they will come. But it has a failsafe. If I don't deactivate it before they arrive, it will send a signal to all their ships in the vicinity. It will send a message of distress." Ethan didn't fully understand at first, but the weight of her words settled in. "Wait, you're saying that if we send the signal, it'll call your people here?" Zira nodded, her face tense. "Yes, but it won't just call them. It will also alert the entire fleet, and they will know exactly where to find me. It's the only way to stop them from destroying everything." Ethan was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. "So, what are we supposed to do?" "We activate the signal. And then what?" Zira looked at him, her eyes steady. "We have to face them head on. We need to be ready. If we send that signal, we will have only one chance to stop them before they can take Earth. It's the only way we can fight back." The weight of her words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He had thought they were just trying to survive, but now they were on the verge of something much bigger. This wasn't just about hiding. It was about stopping a threat that could change the fate of Earth forever. "We'll do it," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. "We'll send the signal. We'll face them, and we'll fight back. I'm not going to let them destroy everything. Not while we have a chance." Zira's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "I didn't want to ask this of you, Ethan. I never wanted to drag you into my fight, but you've proven time and time again that you're willing to stand by me. You're not just helping me. You're helping Earth." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. "We're in this together, Zira. I promised I'd protect you, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." They sat there in silence for a moment, the crackling of the fire the only sound between them. The world around them seemed quiet, almost peaceful, but they both knew that peace wouldn't last for long. What lay ahead would be the hardest challenge either of them had ever faced. They were about to go up against an alien force with unimaginable power, and there was no turning back. But in that moment, as the stars above them twinkled in the dark sky, Ethan and Zira knew that they were ready. Together, they could stand against anything. The next morning, they began their preparations. They knew they didn't have much time. Ethan worked tirelessly to gather supplies, tools, and anything they might need for the confrontation ahead. Zira, too, began to prepare herself, her mind focused and sharp, as she explained the intricacies of her people's technology to him. "I'll need to find the right frequency to send the signal," Zira explained as she worked beside Ethan, her fingers moving quickly as she adjusted the small communication device. "If I don't do this correctly, it could backfire." Ethan nodded, watching her work. He trusted her. She had become more than just an alien to him. She had become his partner, his equal. And whatever happened, he knew they would face it together. As the hours passed and the final preparations were made, a quiet tension hung in the air. They knew the risks. They knew that by sending the signal, they were making themselves vulnerable, but there was no other choice. Ethan looked at Zira one last time before they activated the device. "Ready?" Zira met his gaze with a determined look in her eyes. "Ready." And with that, they'd made their stand. The morning of the confrontation arrived. It was an unsettling kind of quiet, the kind that fills the air just before a storm. The forest around them was still, with only the faint sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves in the wind. Ethan felt the weight of what they were about to do pressing heavily on his chest. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. They were about to face a force far stronger than they had ever imagined. And yet, in some strange way, he felt ready. Zira stood beside him, her face calm but tense. She had been preparing for this moment for as long as she could remember, but even she couldn't shake the uncertainty that lingered in the back of her mind. Ethan had become more than just a protector. He was her ally, her strength, and she wasn't sure how she would have made it this far without him. They had become a team, in every sense of the word. But now, as they stared at the device she had managed to activate, they both knew that everything was about to change. "This is it," Zira said softly, her voice steady but laced with a sense of finality. "Once I send this signal, my people will know exactly where I am. There will be no going back." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the small device she held in her hands. It looked harmless, just a simple piece of technology. But to him, it felt like the key to everything, life or death, victory or defeat. It was a moment that would shape the course of their lives forever. "You've done everything you could," Ethan said quietly, "and we'll do everything we can from here. We won't give up." Zira glanced at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and a touch of sadness. "I didn't want to bring this danger to Earth. I never wanted to put you in the middle of this." "You didn't, Zira," Ethan replied firmly. "This is my choice, and I'm not backing down." Zira gave him a small smile. "You are braver than you know." The air was thick with tension as she pressed a few buttons on the device. A faint light blinked on the screen, and Zira let out a slow breath, as if preparing herself for what was to come. She raised the device above her head, holding it steady. "This is the moment," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan's heart raced, and for a split second, he wondered if they were making the right choice. Was this the right way to stop her people from coming and taking what they needed from Earth? Could they really defeat an entire alien force? It was too late to second-guess. Zira had trusted him, and he had promised to stand by her no matter the cost. Zira pressed a final button, and a high-pitched sound filled the air. The signal was sent. Within moments, Ethan could feel the ground beneath him tremble, a low hum reverberating through the earth. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. Then, all at once, the sound stopped. There was a pause, a long, terrifying silence. For a moment, Ethan thought they had made a terrible mistake. But then, far in the distance, he heard something. A soft rumble in the sky, growing louder with each passing second. "Ethan," Zira whispered, her voice shaky. "They're coming." The sky above them darkened, and a strange light filled the horizon. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to look at Zira. She was calm, but he could see the fear in her eyes. This was it, the moment they had both feared. The moment her people would arrive, and everything they had done to protect Earth would either succeed or fail. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to think of a plan, any way to fight back. But before he could say anything, the ground beneath them rumbled violently, and suddenly a massive ship appeared in the sky. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek, metallic, and glowing with an eerie blue light. It hovered above them, casting a shadow over the forest. Zira's people had arrived.